Time is 6:10 on Thursday, March the 7th. Begins the meeting of the ZBA for the month of March. This meeting is now called to order. First, I'd like to take roll call. We certify the quorum, which we have 4 members. And the purpose of this meeting is to first to approve the meeting minutes of February the 1st, 2024. Do I hear
I make a motion to approve ZBA meeting minutes from February 1st, 2024.
And that's a second.
the motion has been made and been second, so I'd like to take a vote. Raise your right hand if you're for. Raise your right hand if you're against. The motion carries 4-0. We are here to start a regular agenda for consideration and possible action of variance number 24-02 for the special exemption and variance of a non-residential use in the Old Town General Business OT-GB district at the request of Kevin Mohadid. Sorry if I messed that up. Applicant and owner for the approval of a special exception and variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance number 2000-T to allow special exceptions for the development to occur on a property with an existing nonconformities. Section 2.7.3.7 parentheses A and B item is variance request to reduce the required parking for a beauty shop used in the Old Town General Business District for section 4.2.1.2 with the property generally located at 2340 North Grand Boulevard, Pearland, Texas. Staff, do you have a report?
Thanks, Chair. Let me introduce Patrick Bauer to provide the staff report. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Martin. Good evening, Chair, members of the board. As mentioned, there are 2 requests with this tonight. There's one for a special exception and another for a parking variance for a beauty shop. The general location, as mentioned, is 2340 North Grand Boulevard, which is just north of the intersection of Grand Boulevard and Broadway Street. And the zoning, as mentioned, is the Old Town General Business District. And as mentioned, there's 2 different questions here. So we have the special exception, which is specifically for nonconformities on the site, and that nonconformity, that existing nonconformity, is related to the building being within the required front setback. And then the second request is for a parking variance to reduce the minimum on-site required parking for a proposed beauty shop within Old Town from 3 spaces to 2 spaces on the site. And so to date, staff had not received any comments in favor or against the request. And kind of looking at the zoning of the property as well as the surrounding properties, as mentioned, the subject property, which is outlined in yellow, is the Old Town General Business, and the properties to the south, east, and west are both that same Old Town General Business zoning, and then the properties to the north are the Old Town Mixed Use District. And then looking at the future land use designation of the site, the property as well as all the surrounding properties are a part of what's called the Village District, and it's essentially the designation for all of the Old Town area. And so looking at the surrounding uses and kind of getting an aerial view of the property, we see a church to the north, a school to the east, a little bit of like undeveloped land to the south, and then a bank to the west. And kind of looking at the history of the property, it was originally developed with a single-family residence in 1946. Then it was annexed into the city in 1959. and then more recently it was platted in 2023. And here we get a look at the subject property from Grand Boulevard today. And so the proposed site plan, we see what would be the existing house that was once on the site. It's an 840 square foot building. And then we also get a look at the driveway and kind of area where there would be what would be tandem parking spaces or 2 stack spaces. So kind of this area coming off of Grand Boulevard, there'll be a driveway, and then it'll lead into this area, which will provide parking for 2. And then there's also this space, which may be used kind of as maybe a back out, but not as a parking space. So looking at the special exception first, we'll kind of break this down between the special exception and the variance. Looking at the existing nonconformity for the site, that red dashed line running through the property, that would be where the 25-foot front setback would be. Grand Boulevard's kind of on your right-hand side, and the front property is then right here. And then so that red dashed line is the required 25-foot front setback. And the Old Town Journal Business actually requires that any property that doesn't front onto Broadway Street or Main would actually require to have a 25-foot front setback, which this one is kind of the rarity where there's a property on Old Town General Business that doesn't front onto Main or Broadway, so it has that 25-foot front setback. And so we see that kind of light blue area. This would be the portion of the building that is currently within that 25-foot front setback, so it would be considered an existing nonconformity on the site, even though it may have been built at a time whenever a 25-foot front setback may not have been the case. And so staff finds that the special exception request meets criterion 4 for approval of a special exception, that construction of a new structure or improvements on the same property where a nonconformity already exists, whether it is a nonconformity in an existing structure or of the property itself, provided the new structure assumes the existing nonconforming status and no nonconforming use is expanded into the structure. So as mentioned, the existing property is classified as being nonconforming currently in regards to that 25-foot front setback. And if the site were to come into compliance with the required front setback, then it would require a portion of the building to essentially be demolished as it encroaches into that area, which may impose a hardship on the property. So the requested special exception is to allow for the existing building to remain within the required 25-foot front setback as the property is developed with essentially the required parking for the use. And so as the request meets criterion 4 for granting a special exception, staff recommends approval of the special exception request to allow for improvements to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity. Kind of now shifting to actually the variance request, which is for any new improvements that are proposed for the property. Previously, this was a residence, so no parking would have been required. They may have had a driveway at one point, but now that the proposed use is a beauty shop, we look at what the minimum required parking would be for that beauty shop. And so a beauty shop is required to have 1 space per every 200 square feet of gross floor area. There's an additional caveat in the Old Town District section that allows for the required parking if that non-residential use is in an existing structure to be reduced by 50%. And so kind of doing the math in that, there's the 840 square foot building would be required to have, rounded up would be 5 spaces on the site. And with that reduction, the 50%, that comes to 2.5, which you round up to 3 spaces. So 3 spaces would be required on site. As you can see in the site plan, they were requesting 2 parking spaces to be on site. So that'd be a reduction of 1. And so staff found that the request met 4 of the 8 criteria for granting a variance. And while the availability of parking there is parking within Grand Boulevard that is currently used by different uses throughout that area, while that is not a physical hardship for the subject property, staff recognizes that the parking within the Grand Boulevard right-of-way is a unique feature to the Old Town District, specifically for properties along Grand Boulevard. The parking is currently within Grand Boulevard is utilized by the existing non-residential uses in the area, such as the church and the school. However, the UDC does not provide a means by which that parking within the right-of-way may count towards the parking for the property or the on-site parking. So staff recognizes that the applicant is requesting to reduce the minimum parking by only one space, and that parking is available within Grand Boulevard. And so therefore, staff recommends approval of the requested variance with the following condition: that all proposed on-site parking spaces are required to be behind the front face of the building, which is how the site plan currently sits today. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much. At this point, does the applicant like to make a presentation?
Ms.
you very much.
Mohammedian, unfortunately, the microphones that we have can't pick up your voice. Would you mind going to the microphone, to the podium behind us? Thank you.
Patrick has pretty much covered everything that we need. There's just two exceptions that we need, and he covered them well.
Thank you very much. At this time, do we have any persons wishing to speak for or against the proposed variance request? Nope. Okay, since there's no one at this point, we'd like to move on to the staff, commission, applicant discussion. Does the board have any questions?
Pardon me, I want to ask a question for my education, Lawrence, if I could. I understand what we're voting on tonight. Anytime the city policy is going to be, anytime we would, if there were requests to add on to that structure, we could, the UDC, the way it's set up today, would not allow that structure to be any closer to the existing right-of-way of the street. It'd still have to have a 25-foot variance, or excuse me, a 25-foot setback. We could not grant a variance on that. Is that a true statement?
Yes, sir. So when you go back to the special exception, you cannot increase nonconformity.
That's
So,
really what I was trying to get.
That's the, I think I've answered the question for you.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions I had.
Any other questions? I would like like to close that, the applicant commission discussion, and prior to moving on to the consideration, I would like to acknowledge a new member, Beyonce Jacob, joining our board. Thank you. Could you please put back the recommended?
So just as a reminder, with this having both a special exception component and a variance component, typically we've handled these as separate items in the past, but the board is welcome to either maintain them as separate or vote on them together.
I guess our preference would be to vote it on separately. That way there's no confusion.
So
Gary, would
first
you-
we've got on the special exception on
Yes.
the screen for you.
Gary, would you like to make?
Yes. So we want to vote on the special exception first, is
Yes.
the way we want to do that. All right. I make a motion to approve. And before I say this, are we going to include in this special exception the use or the conditional use of allowing the 2 parking spaces?
That's going to be handled.
Mr. Schrum, the condition that staff is recommending is for the variance.
Okay.
For the nonconformity condition.
Okay. Well, in that case, I make a motion to approve variance 24-02 as presented.
I second the motion.
Just to clarify, approving the variance, is that
The special exception. So it's
This is
Part
the
A, the special exception, VARZ 2402, subparagraph A.
You modify that, Gary?
Okay, how do you want me to say it then? Just exactly like that?
On the very top,
I recommend that you say "so moved" when I finish talking.
Like you're thinking.
I would recommend a motion to approve VARZ 24-02, subparagraph A, a special exception request to allow for improvements to occur on a property with an existing nonconformity.
So moved.
Need a second?
can you raise your right hand if you're for it? And raise your right hand if you're voting against it. Motion carries 4-0. Would you like to take on this?
Shall he say it and I'll move it, or?
If you would prefer, yes, ma'am, I'd be
I
more
can
than happy to. I would recommend a motion to approve VARZ 24-02, request B, a variance to reduce the minimum on-site required parking for a proposed beauty shop within Old Town from 3 to 2 spaces with the condition to include staff recommendation.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Raise your right hand if you're for it. Motion. Raise your right hand if you're against the motion. The motion carries 4-0. And this concludes our meeting for today.
Time, please.
I'm
Time?
sorry, the time is 6:26.
Thank you.